I am not the brightest person. I am not the brightest person. I am not the brightest person.
How dare you?
Hi, and welcome to the Last Ward 13 show. That doesn't mean we won't be back next week, but we'll be under a different name. Since I'm writing a book called We Pick Your President, because I've covered New Hampshire primary. Jeez. Well, first one I remember, 68, 72, but I didn't cover it till 2008, and 12, and 16, and 2020. Used to do it for Yahoo News, then just as a freelance. It's funny, I was just telling Brendan, my director, I'm going to change the title to WPYP TV Manchester, which, because We Pick Your President is such a ponderous title. Now, my beloved laptop, which is like from 2012, yeah, I had it, I covered, I think it's 2011, I covered quite a few political events, including primaries and elections with that. It was a Dell XPS. And Windows 7, oh, how I love Windows 7, refused to upgrade. And, of course, it hasn't been supported for over a year now. And I was writing like mad this weekend. And then all of a sudden, it just, something was wrong. And there's no way to go on to the site, Microsoft site, because the only software they'll support is 8.1 and above. And because they want you to have Windows 10, of course. And I am just a Luddite. The Luddites were anti-technologists, I guess we'd call them now, in England and during the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, that used to go around destroying the factories that were creating said Industrial Revolution, because it was destroying the lives they knew and making them wage slaves in all but name and legality. Of course, they could, if they had the gumption, get on a boat and come to North America or other places, Australia, I guess. How many of them were just prisoners, just like many of the white people, Europeans, English. That's so silly, using the term white. Because when you're talking about North America, it was the part we're talking about. It was the three groups of English, French, and Spanish. And a lot of the English colonists some of them came here as prisoners or as indentured servants for 5 to 7 years. Everybody talks about, well, they don't they don't teach slavery at school. They certainly taught it to us in the 60s and 70s in Manchester. So I think there's a lot of hyperbole there. But Luddites. I am a Luddite. I stick to my Windows 7 computer, and it's failed me, folks. So I went to have to write by hand. So I went and grabbed an old notebook, pull it out, and start writing. And then I look at the cover. I'm not going to have you zoom in, but it's called The Trump Parade or We Pick Your President from 2017. So I guess, that is the title. That's the title of my book. And that's kind of like a thumbs up from the various gods, if not the muse herself. So, hey, we have a little bit about Victoria Sullivan there. I just want to say something, folks. If you have heating oil, if you're heating your house with heating oil, and if you're at a half, your tank's at a half, it's time to order your oil. It's not being picked up by the news right now, except outside of Maine, but there's major disruptions in the heating oil. I called my company, and they said they can't. They can only schedule starting the week of February 7th. That's 12 days away. And if you stick to the standard was when you get down to a quarter tank of oil, you order it. Unfortunately, with my problems with memory and everything, last week I checked, it was above a quarter. Now it's at an 8, and I'm thinking, holy Hannah. So I called them up and found out that they're really scheduling it out, and so everybody. My sister had ordered oil, and it took 4 days instead of it's usually most 2 days when you get oil. But now there are supply disruptions. One of them is that people can't hire drivers, apparently. But I have a lot more to say about this situation, but not here, because I don't want to trigger my PTSD, because let's forget about that. My other big is Citizens Bank. Oh my God, how they love to give you fees. That's a whole show in itself. But we'll forget about that. Hey, Brendan, can you put up the, what's it called? The stick in the mud. Yes, here we go. Stick in the mud is someone who's old-fashioned or unprogressive, especially one who's intellectually dull. Synonyms are antediluvian, dodo, fossil, FUD. FUD, I love that because Mad Magazine used to use it all the time. FUD, fuddy-duddy, a fuss budget, which Lucy Van Pelt of the Charlie Brown Peanuts, I always think of it as Charlie Brown, my greatest hero, I still identify with, and various other names, but we just faded away. Hey, do we have that Charlie Brown? You're thinking of Charlie Brown. Or did I send that to you? Is it called Charlie Brown or Charlie? I know that on my computer it has a different name that's obscene. Perhaps I didn't send it to you.
I don't see it.
Thank God, because I had to censor it. But maybe next week we'll be able to show it. Charlie Brown sitting between President Trump and Chris Sununu. But, since I brought it up about the stick in the mud, we're going to talk a little bit about Victoria Sullivan. Oh, my, people told me, oh, Hoppy, you've got to come in on, this social group, that social group. And Victoria Sullivan is doing her thing about she's being a social media warrior. Wouldn't you know it? My Facebook online is no longer. Where the hell is it? Yeah, I'm a real Luddite, folks. Nothing's working right now. What are they trying to do to me? I was on. My Facebook account's not coming up. Okay. And Victoria Sullivan is going at it again. I was going to go on and share, here we go, some of the stuff from one of the sites. Last week I talked about Victoria Sullivan, and I said I believe that maybe I did or maybe I didn't. I know I was talking about her. I might have just written about it. But I believe that Victoria Sullivan, this is just an opinion, folks, just an opinion. And as I said last week, I'm not a psychologist. I've read psychology texts like Freud, Jung, and others. How could you not if you want to be an educated person? But I probably took just one, Psych 101 at university. I'm not a psychologist. This is all just, speculation, opinion. And part of the opinion I have of Victoria Sullivan is that she suffers from what Jung, the great Swiss psychologist who was close to Freud for many years, would have called ego inflation. What is ego inflation, you might ask? Well, in my non-technical way, my interpretation of it, ego inflation would be best illustrated by something that D.H. Lawrence, the great English writer who came out of the working class. If you've read Sons and Lovers, which I did back at West High School back in the mid-'70s, D.H. Lawrence wrote a book called The Apocalypse, because amongst the working class people that he came up with, was born into that class, and it's particularly true amongst like the Welsh of the time. We're talking about the turn of the last century, because the Welsh were not Church of England, or we'd call Anglican adherents. They were they would go to chapel, frequently Baptist, but non-Church of England. They would call that Low Church. And amongst the Welsh and amongst many working people, when they would go to a chapel or to church, there was a lot of appeal to them of a messianic type of thinking. And Lawrence wrote a book, very short book called The Apocalypse, which was quite fascinating. And he, pulling from him about the psychology of these working people, these people that were just brutally exploited, like miners and workers before World War II in England or the United States. We have a call coming in, but hello?
Yes, I'm calling in to be a guest on Ward 13.
Well, you're about 10 minutes early.
Oh, I'm sorry, John.
Could you call in 10 minutes, and then we'll be ready for you, Eric?
Oh, okay. I apologize, John. I'm sorry. I'll call in 10 minutes.
But 10 minutes, I'm counting on you, or I'm just going to be boring the entire state of New Hampshire. I'm talking about D.H. Lawrence and the Apocalypse and how it applies to local politics here in Manchester. So you have to call in. I'm praying that you do again.
I will call in 10 minutes then and save the people.
Right. Well, we'll go from the Apocalypse to Apocalypse Now, okay?
Perfect.
10 minutes. Okay.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Well, Lawrence wrote about what these people that the apocalypse, this evangelical type of mindset appeals to them. They want to sit on the right knee of God. Right on the right knee of God himself, and pass judgment on people. And of course, you get your jollies when you're an apocalyptic evangelical, condemning people, along with the big man himself. The problem with that scenario and that mindset, and this is the real ego inflation, is that you just don't think of yourself as, this humble person, a Rich Gerard type, humble Rich Gerard, sitting on the knee of God. You start thinking you are God Himself, and that is ego inflation. Because when you follow the career of Victoria Sullivan here in Manchester and her continuing political antics, I believe that you're looking at a person that suffers from ego inflation. She is fancying herself as a messiah. She's a messiah from Manchester, the Queen City. And she just doesn't want to be the empress, the queen or the empress. It's a messianic complex. The way she talks about things in her campaign announcement for running for alderman from Ward 9 to replace the late, great Barbara Shaw. And, of course, on her site, it's Victoria Sullivan, alderman of Ward 9, just like she was Victoria Sullivan, mayor of Manchester. Talk about egotism and projection. I mean, that's signaling about the mindset of the person. I mean, she talks about how she is going to come in, into City Hall. Of course, there's no City Hall in this. I don't know why. It's like I think I'm looking out the window because I have it on my the side too. She's going to go to City Hall and she's going to enact her homelessness plan, her plan for the homeless. And because only Victoria Sullivan can save the homeless. Only she can redeem them from the, I would like to use obscenity, but actually scatological, but I won't, from the perilous state they find themselves in. Only she can do that. That Bill Barry has been working on this for many years. Pat Long has been working on this for many years. Our great friend and a staple of Manchester Public TV, Glenn R.J. Ouellette, the People's Mayor, that he's been working. Glenn R.J. Ouellette has actually done a great deal to help homeless people. And the alderman went down to Cambridge to see how they did things. I mean, Bill Barry, Pat Long, other people, they've been working on this issue hands-on for years. It's not simple, folks. It's not simple, folks, when they dump. Joe Levesque is right. Every town and city, Nashua, sends their people here to Manchester. That's true in any state. The big city, absorbs people. But New Hampshire, rather than other states, they just, it's like, to you, Manchester. And I've been told that, all my political life. Up at the Clown College in Concord, everybody just wants to take a dump on Manchester. Just like before 9/11, everybody in the whole United States hated New York City. Just the way it was. And but we have a Messiah that's going to come in here and metaphorically raise the dead. It's like nobody in this city has ever done a damn thing. Not a damn thing at all, have they? But we have the Messiah, Victoria Sullivan, is going to come and redeem us all. I mean, it is really beyond belief. It reminds me of what's called the little man syndrome. Because, I spent my college years at Boston University, had the best political science faculty of its time. Had Howard Zinn and other great professors. And people would be studying both the rise of fascism and Nazism, which is a form of it, and of the Soviet system, because which is socialism, you could say, and communism, but as they're both totalitarian systems. These are systems that went beyond the pale, and people wanted to understand how it happened. How did it happen? Because you just can't say it's anti-Semitism that caused the Shoah, or we call the Holocaust, and the Shoah, which was the destruction of European Jewry. It's just not anti-Semitism in Germany, because if you were going to pick in the year 1900 and 1910, what country would have a Holocaust, a Shoah, you'd pick France. France was far more notorious for its institutional anti-Semitism than Germany. German Jews were more established in Germany, yet it happened. And how did the fascism, how did people just get the Germans, and there were fascists in France. There were fascists in the 30s. There was the Alliance Française, which was fascist. There were fascist organizations in Quebec. There was fascist organizations right here in the United States. The German-American Boon, the Silver Shirts. And we studied that, and there was a concept called the little man. We're talking about, once again, a little man. In this sense, it was more of like a lower middle class type of person, a shopkeeper, somebody that was just devastated, like in Germany and other countries, by the World War and the inflation, and then you had the Great Depression. And what fascism, what the big man like a Mussolini or Hitler allows them is to identify, self-identify, and it boosts their ego. The little man and his or her attraction to fascism and the fascism of the big man, another concept we studied. Hitler was very popular amongst women in Germany. It's hard to believe that Adolf Hitler was a sex pot, but like David Bowie said around 1975 or 76 in a Playboy interview, which has been quoted by academics, Hitler was the first rock star. But he staged a whole nation rather than just, like a show in Shea Stadium or something. Although he had his stadium shows, didn't he? And we see that with Trump. And it's, Trump to me, you just look at Lyndon Johnson and Richard Nixon and whatever they were, the evil they did far outweighs whatever Trump did, because they were highly competent and intelligent people. They just had, let themselves into the dark side, like Shakespeare's Richard III. Trump was just, let's not get into Dear Donald Trump, the Trump parade, or we pick your president. But I just see a lot of, you saw with Trump and the people that just started worshiping this SOB, you just saw the little man, little woman, little person syndrome, where they are going to find their self-worth through this authoritarian demigod. Rather than being God, finding God in the chapel, you find the demigod Trump or Hitler, Trump on TV, where you could go to one of his rallies. And Hitler, who came to power, the supreme power in 1933, the same year as Franklin D. Roosevelt, his great nemesis, who destroyed him, they both were masters of the radio, and the Nazi Germany, but just incredible, their mastery of the mass media. That was these were the first two nations, that the United States and Germany, that perfected mass media. But I think with Victoria Sullivan, where they're messianic, this is just an opinion, where they're messianism, I think that's what we have here, because this is a perpetual candidate. I think here's a person, as I said the other week, that, she just basically takes a dump on Manchester and its institutions. She came from somewhere else, and as many people have said to me, if you don't like it, why don't you leave? Why would you leave when you can save the friggin' place? Okay. Eric, how are you? Eric, you there? Oh, jeez. What happened, Brendan?
I don't know. Hang it up.
I hope he calls back.
It's ringing again. There you go.
Eric, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon, Mr. Hopwood.
Hello, and my preaching to the masses is over. Hey, why don't you introduce yourself to the Ward 13 audience, many of whom are fans of Matt Connerton. We used to do back-to-back shows on public TV.
Okay. My name is Eric Pilcher, and I'm from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And I do classic film reviews with Eric Pilcher every Friday afternoon on Matt Connerton Unleashed.
You do your own podcast?
No, actually, I don't. I'm kind of content just doing my classic film thing for Matt's show.
Yeah.
And whatever other odds and ends come up, I've been a guest on Billy Painter's Outlaw Radio. Right. You've had me on Ward 13, so I kind of like that, being a spot guest.
Well, this is actually the last Ward 13 show. We're renaming ourselves because I'm writing a book about New Hampshire and its role in the primary called We Pick Your President. But that's a ponderous title, so we're going to be WPYP TV Manchester. And we'll invite you on and try to get you on Skype so they can see your lovely face.
That would be awesome.
So I was talking about the apocalypse, but you recently did a 2-part series on a movie that I was 20 years old when it came out. I was at Boston University, and it was like what Kubrick's 2001 was to the, I'm part of the baby boom generation, but the early part of the baby boom generation, Apocalypse Now, people don't realize, was a monstrous hit. I'm not talking about like Star Wars type of hit. It only made half as much money, like $100 million, which was a lot of money then. But it had a huge cultural impact. People don't really write about that now. But tell me about what you think of Apocalypse Now. Like, what generation are you? If you want to tell us, how old are you?
I'm 38. I was born in 1983.
Okay.
I guess I'm lucky because I had what would now, if I look at my past, I had a lot of people that influenced my film taste indirectly.
Yeah.
I was in a classroom my freshman year of high school, and there were some bad kids in the class, and they were screaming, "I'm Mafia, I'm Mafia, I'm Mafia," and our teacher, Al Chisholm, said, you boys think you're Mafia? Okay. He goes, he gave us permission slips for an R-rated movie because we were freshmen. And all of our parents signed them, and he had us watch The Godfather.
The Godfather 1, which, as I told you before, I think that's the great American movie. I know you're more fond of Godfather 2, which they're kind of, somebody can see them as a unit themselves, but The Godfather's a little more classical narrative, So I give it the edge. But
the reason why I love 2 more than 1 is the way the story is told.
Right.
You have Vito rising up, and you have Michael declining, and they're at the same age in life, and it's just this beautiful contrast that you see. That I think people now, no offense to anyone, have the attention span of an ant. You couldn't make a movie. You couldn't make that movie now.
No, you couldn't. They were both 3 hours long. But you want to know something? Number one, The Godfather, when I saw it on TV in 1974, because there was only 3 networks and there was no cable TV unless you lived like in some like Hodgepodge Lodge, West Virginia, where you couldn't get a broadcast because of the mountains. And I said, this is a great movie. And I was 14 years old, and I was just starting to understand that it was an art. But here's another thing, Eric, because we had to see it in a theater, and they used to have rerun houses like the Harvard Square Theater. Every day there was a bill, like there'd be Godfather 2 and maybe another great like detective movie or something. You'd see 2 great movies but they're years old. They called them revival houses, and they would be still milking money out of them because their consumer video hadn't started yet. So here's about Godfather 2. Until it came out in DVD, nobody could figure out really what happened. But now we can hear on the phone. You can actually hear on the phone that Johnny, what was his name? Johnny, the guy who wound up in the
Johnny
Sopranos.
Ola.
Ola is talking to Fredo, and you can hear what he's saying. We
Right.
couldn't figure out what the hell was
Interesting.
happening. And that was part of the movie. He didn't know what happened. But see, he didn't know. Michael didn't know what happened either. You know?
Right, and you're really lost without that phone conversation.
Right, he didn't. But until
Um,
the DVD, unless you could find the script, you didn't know what the hell happened. So for 20 years, we thought, here's a great, great movie. TV Guide in the 90s named it the #1 movie of all time, Godfather 2. But it wasn't until it's out on DVD you figure, oh, the phone call. But, yeah.
And what's interesting about Johnny Ola is, I'm sure you know, but a lot of people don't catch this. He is played by the same man who played Junior Soprano.
That's right.
In The Sopranos.
Right.
Dominic Chianese.
Yeah, in The Godfather 2, he's a Jewish gangster with the Hyman Roth, who's modeled after Meyer Lansky, but then he's an Italian.
Yeah.
And if you watch one of the Sopranos episodes, they say, you know, James Caan's not Italian. And the guys are all, what? Because the first Godfather, James Caan, is a very talented actor, but it kind of like stereotyped him in a way, you know, as a tough guy.
Oh, yeah.
And he had a broader range
And,
than that. Yeah.
I believe Tony Sirico, who plays Paulie Walnuts, he is also in The Godfather Part 2 as a hitman.
Right, yeah. Oh, there's all sorts of character. If you're an ethnic in the old days in the movies, it's like when Scorsese was in Boston shooting the movie with Nicholson and all the young studs. They put a thing, all Irish-looking actors. They did. They put that out. They wanted mix. So if you're Italian, yeah. That was a hell of a movie. But that's Francis Coppola. And he made Apocalypse
Yes, and
Now.
that was my introduction to him. And after I saw The Godfather, I bought a book called The Godfather Legacy by Harlan Lebo.
Yeah.
And he was talking about how when he was filming Apocalypse Now, he was editing The Godfather for TV. And I'm like, well, what is this Apocalypse Now? Dummy little freshman me, I thought it was another gangster movie.
I actually have the TV cut on videotapes. It's like 8 or 9 hours long. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
The saga. Yep. And so I ended up the summer before my sophomore year renting Apocalypse Now, and I remember not knowing what to think then. Because keep in mind, I'm a 15-year-old.
Right.
I don't know much about Vietnam yet, and I just know that it left an impact on me. Then when I started taking film classes when I was in college, I viewed it and really gained an appreciation of it. And I told my instructor, and she goes, "You should see Hearts of Darkness."
Right,
and
the
she
documentary.
gave me her VHS copy, and I was blown away. I'm like, how did this movie even make the screen?
Yeah, and as I told you, Werner Herzog, the great German director, his oh my God, the first movie he made with Kinski down in Peru. What's it?
Aguirre, Wrath of God.
Right, that was that came out. It was made in 72, but it didn't come out in the States until 77. And that was a big movie when you go to the Orson Welles cinema. They had art cinemas, that just featured art films, foreign films and that. And that actually influenced Coppola and Apocalypse Now because it also has its scenes on, going into the river and that. But then Herzog tried to make his equivalent of Apocalypse Now, Fitzcarraldo, and he had the exact same troubles, except a little smaller scale. But to him, of course, it was as big as what Coppola was dealing with. And there was a great documentary about that, Les Blanc, Burden of Dreams. But it's fun because these people, like all great artists, they influenced each other. But have you ever seen Apocalypse Now on a big screen?
I think the biggest I've seen it is I have a 70-inch TV.
Right.
And I viewed it I have the 4K edition of Apocalypse Now.
Yep.
And that is how I watched it for my film review. But no, I have not seen it in theaters, although it is coming back to theaters this year as a part of Turner Classic
Great.
Movies, Big Screen Classic.
You have to see it in the big screen.
I might have the opportunity.
Yeah, I saw it because they used to have what's called the first run house. Now, when Apocalypse Now was released, it was released in New York and Los Angeles. And it played there for almost a month because it was a different time was different then. And magazines were actually very powerful parts of culture. So, you'd read the newspaper review, and then a week later, you'd have a Newsweek or a Time review. But then there were great magazines like, Atlantic or Harper's, and there was called the Saturday Review. Some of them were weekly. Some came out every month, and people would take more time before they would write their review. But so by the time it gets to Boston and San Francisco, second-tier cities, like 3 weeks or 4 weeks later, we've heard all about it. But I saw it in what's called the First Run House, huge screen in Boston. And my God, I got to tell you, the first half of the movie, which climaxes with the attack on the village, to the flight of the Valkyries. I mean, it was stunning. It was just stunning to watch that, and everybody was blown away by that sequence. And then you got these great character actor like Robert Duvall, who's just establishing himself as the premier character actor of his time. You know what I mean? And everybody was just blown away when you saw that sequence. Nobody'd seen anything like it. And folks, Apocalypse Now is the last movie, I think, of that scale that uses practical effects. There's no CGI. When they drop napalm and like a mile of the jungle blows up, they're blowing it up with gasoline and dynamite. And you're watching this and it's like, holy Christ. Then the soundtrack with the Doors and everything. But see, the big rap on that movie was that it was the rest of the film is an anticlimax. It climaxed too soon. But see, I disagreed with that even at the time as I'm 20 years old and trying to discover about movies. And you have to understand another thing. Brando was the greatest actor probably in screen of his time, but of all time. I mean, this guy's reputation dominated for over half a century, probably 70 years, where a John Barrymore was passé after 10 years and other great actors. And nobody knew he was fat. And when you see him finally, here's the great actor who made The Godfather and Last Tango in Paris, which made huge. The Godfather was the highest grossing film. It broke the records until it was surpassed by Jaws. And then we're waiting to see the greatest screen actor of all time. And then you're looking at him and he's like Buddha, And he's reading T.S. Eliot, a college boy's your dream. T.S. Eliot was huge then. I mean, it really blew people away. But there was all sorts of mixed reviews,
I just was so blown away at the dramatics, the drama that went with Brando in that film. That he was just basically going to take $1 million and no show.
$2.5 million. $2.5 million for 2 weeks.
Yep, but he was advanced $1 million. And
that's right. He wasn't. Yeah, he advanced because Apocalypse Now, folks, was bedeviled by terrible weather, and and then they had to fire the leading man, Harvey Keitel. And then the replacement, who was just terrific in it, Martin Sheen, had a heart attack that nearly killed him. So it was behind schedule. And Brando's friend, who was his agent, said, when he was warning Richard Donner about Superman, he says, you've got to understand, Marlon doesn't want to work. He doesn't like to work. He's lazy. So he's going to do everything he can not to work. And he got... But you see, he really respected Coppola. But why Coppola hired him was because Bertolucci, when he was making Last Tango in Paris, which was shot by oh Jesus, I'm thinking Vilmos Zsigmond, but that's another cinematographer altogether. You know the cinematographer I'm talking about, Apocalypse Now. He won 3 Oscars.
Yes.
Vittorio Storaro.
I actually have my computer up. I forget his name.
Vittorio
He
Storaro.
did win an Oscar.
Yeah. Vittorio Storaro is one of the greatest cinematographers, directors of photography ever. And he shot Last Tango in Paris. Now, Last Tango in Paris was written in French for Jean-Louis Trintignant, who was a great actor, but he would not play a role where he's going to have to be bare-ass in the movie, you know. First it was Catherine Deneuve, then it was going to be Dominique Sanda. But then he got Brando. And Brando, you know, this is a script in French, and Brando, and French and Italian, but Brando, of course, knew French because he lived in Tahiti many years and he traveled a lot. But Brando essentially wrote his own script in that they put the camera in front of him and he has the idea, and that's him. That is an actor as an auteur. He's actually writing, you know, his part as it goes on, and he's probably the only actor that could really do it. John Huston, the great director, said Brando was the only genius he ever met as an actor. And his father, Walter Huston, was a great actor. But you see when you're watching the film, the documentary that Eleanor Coppola created, Hearts of Darkness, you're realizing that Coppola he's got a script that he got from John Milius and had to rewrite himself. And he was a great screenwriter himself. He won an Oscar for Patton, Coppola. He's a director who is a writer, who's literate. And he's actually making it up as they go along. You can, watch it. And Brando is there to be his co-writer. And Brando comes in fat and says that he thinks Heart of Darkness, the Conrad book it's based on, is a bunch of crap. And then he finds out he never even read it. Remember that?
Yes. And let's also, now since we're going into the sheer and utter insanity, the state Dennis Hopper was in on that set. Good gracious.
I met Dennis Hopper before he got his comeback. He made a movie in Canada called Out of the Blue, which is a very good movie. You should watch it. And I saw him. He was in Boston with it. It was before his comeback, before Blue Velvet. And, oh, my God. That guy looked like he was devastated. Too much drugs, too much everything. But Dennis Hopper in '69, when he directed Easy Rider, people forget that was a watershed of a movie. It made a fortune, and it was supposed to revolutionize, all of filmmaking, which it did for a brief period. But Coppola and Brando, Brando got $2.25 million against 13% of the gross for 2 weeks' work. But of course, he shows up and he hasn't read the script, so he gave him 2 weeks. Because after your 2 weeks, when you got a contract, you go into overtime, which is really expensive. So I guess they took a boat trip, figured out how we're going to try to improvise it, and then they went at it. There's 8 hours of improvisations of Brando in that temple that they say is on tape somewhere,
Well, one of the scenes that made it, and it's very, you almost miss it, is he is giving that speech about when he first meets Willard, not the horror speech, the first one. And at the end of
You're
it,
an errand boy.
He pauses, and you're an errand boy. And at the end of it, he goes, I ate a bug.
Oh, but that's it. That's in one of the outtakes.
Yeah, it's man, it's that's worked so much in it, and he just went off the cuff with that. And people don't, and today I don't think there's an appreciation for stuff like that in movies. We want everything to be streamlined and perfect and big explosions because, again, attention spans of ants. We need these big explosions, and we need to sit in a movie theater and have it and feel like we're in a blender.
That's true.
It's no, you don't need that. You just need attention. And if you have the attention, you can appreciate the beauty and the interchanging parts that are going on.
That's true. In the 80s, there's a great book by John Gregory Dunn, who was Joan Didion's husband, who was a screenwriter. And by the 80s, they call the explosion whammies, because they had written movies since like the late 60s together. And he says, we want whammies. And then the third, because it's 3 acts. Whammy in the first act, whammy in the second, whammy, 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 whammy. That was like explosions and everything. It's just like, holy Christ. But, as you're talking, because Coppola suddenly gets this fat Brando, and Brando decides to shave his head, and, he was grossly overweight. But Vittorio Storaro and Coppola, because it is a group art, Storaro knows,
Right.
I will light him in darkness, and you just see his bald head coming in and out, and they made something quite beautiful. And the film was made in the editing suite, and it took 3 years to edit. And it wasn't just Coppola overseeing it. He invited people would edit sections. His great sound editor, who won a couple of Oscars, his name escapes me. We can talk about him in the future. He edited part of the movie, But it was a 3-year thing. People waited for that movie.
1 million feet of film was shot
Right.
for Apocalypse Now.
And then it was made in the cutting room. And films are made in the cutting room. But, see, I thought it was a masterpiece when I saw it. And I still do, and it did become considered the masterpiece after like 10 years or so. But, yeah, go ahead.
My personal opinion, and I said this at the end of my review, I think it is the greatest war movie ever made. And people will say, well, there's Patton, there's Platoon, and those are great films. But I just think, I think Apocalypse Now really puts you in it, and you are not a viewer. At some point, I feel everybody goes through this. If they truly watch the film, I feel they become a part of the film.
Well, that's the thing.
They are in it.
Well, Harvey Keitel got fired because he said he was he was a quirky actor. He was Scorsese's actor before De Niro became his actor. And when I first saw De Niro and Harvey Keitel on screen, it was like, oh my God, it must be like what people saw Brando in the first Method Actors. Like, who are these guys? Because they had distinct and quirky personalities, which was stylized in a way, but it created a different type of reality. You brought, like when you watch Taxi Driver, holy Christ, just brings you into this horrible world. And I'm sure Brando is like that because he created a new type of reality that then it becomes. But he fired Harvey Keitel because he said, I needed an actor that was less demonstrative, because the audience could see things through their eyes. And I think that Martin Sheen was brilliant in that role as Willard.
Yeah.
And then he looks like
it's one of his best roles.
Yeah, and go ahead.
Just the insanity that Martin Sheen in that movie conveys so many different emotions.
Yeah.
And he doesn't do it with words. I love that you said that about you saw it in his eyes. Because you see it in Martin Sheen's eyes. Like this fear, the anger with Chef when he keeps asking about the mission. And then when Chef, this little nuance that I never picked up until I watched it for the review. When Chef is shot with the arrow as they're approaching Kurtz's camp. He tries to pull Martin Sheen's throat through the arrowhead.
Right, to kill him.
And he dies before he can do it. He lets him go because he's dead. If you're like, wow, that's powerful.
When you
that's cinema. That's not film. That's cinema.
Right. When you were watching the movie in 1979, Martin Sheen, who was half Irish and looks Irish, he actually looks like a Kennedy, and he played Robert F. Kennedy in the Missiles of October, which was a big TV movie that made a big splash. Everybody knew that there was a tension. You still had the tension, like it burst out again a couple of years ago, between whites and blacks. And blacks and poor whites were overwhelmingly had to fight that war. Blacks and Hispanics out of their far more than the population that they represented were in that movie. And there are subtleties about that, like when they're at the bridge and there are all those black soldiers just sitting in that dugout. They don't want a part of this. And that's very true because Michael Herr, who was a journalist in Vietnam, helped write. He wrote the narration of Willard and helped with the script, and then later helped Stanley Kubrick with Full Metal Jacket, which we can come back and talk about that because it's a different complementary film. But see, the thing between the white and the black was there too. But until you're in the Army, you wouldn't realize there's a thing between an officer and an enlisted man, because an enlisted man is convinced an officer is a expletive-deleted hole that doesn't know what he's doing and will destroy them. It's just what he does, right? And that's chef. That's hot. That's Cambodia. That's classified. He won't tell him anything. When I'm at the VA, some of the old Vietnam vets, I'm convinced they look at me as like the first lieutenant that came in and they blame for what happened to them in Vietnam. But do you realize when you first watched the movie, and now that's an anti-Vietnam War movie?
Oh, yeah. I think you pick it up very quickly.
So you did.
I would say you pick it up. It's in your face with the brilliantly played Sergeant William Kilgore, Robert Duvall's role, and he was robbed of Best Supporting Actor.
Well,
he should have won hands down for that role.
Melvin Douglas was a great old character actor. He'd already won an Oscar, and he was dying, so, well, he didn't quite die then. But,
just you see it, and he's napalming a village so they can surf. You're like, what? But these are the stories that were being reported at that time. That were coming out of Vietnam when the troops were coming home. That this is what was going on. It was just reckless abandon in a way.
That was really not quite known that all that was based on reality until after that movie, because a lot of that was suppressed. A lot of those stories were revealed, but a lot of it was suppressed. But, it's the whole thing, destroying them to save them. We're going to destroy the village to save it. And he's the only one in the whole movie, Kilgore, Lieutenant Kilgore, who was overtly racist. He's the one who calls them the names, but then when they bring the old guy with his guts being held, that he says, "Oh well, I respect that," right? And as Willard says, all the men loved him because they felt like he had some type of power, magic, that they'd be safe with him. And he's so reckless and that. But that whole thing about the napalm, which that scene on a big screen, you'd never seen anything like that before. Because nobody's going to blow off like 50,000 gallons of gasoline.
I think that began when they loaded up James Caan with 5 pounds of explosives in The Godfather, and I think maybe in his head Coppola was just like, how can I go bigger? What can I do? What's the next step after 5 pounds of explosives rigged to a human being?
James, I think there was over 140 caps. In the old days, they have to have a blood bladder and a cap that actually has an explosive on it. There was over 140, a record. And the guy, just before they shot, that put them on him, who was a well-known, FX guy, told him, "I'm not sure if I've got them all aiming out." He says, and Khan says, "Well, that certainly shows in my performance." It's like, holy.
Yeah. In the book by Harlan Lebo, he tells James, and I love that story. James, he goes right before the scene. He tells him, he goes, "I've never done this before."
It's like, And yeah, it was something. But yeah, The Godfather is because of the real bloodbath. But one of the film, we'll have to talk again. Maybe we should do a radio podcast because this went by really quickly. Anything else you got?
It did.
Anything else you got to say? Sum up Apocalypse Now to you.
I think at the end of the review, and I feel so convicted in this statement that I think if you are a fan of film, or you are just starting to really truly appreciate the art of film, you need to view Apocalypse Now.
Oh, yeah.
Just because of how it's painfully beautiful, and it tells such a heart-wrenching, emotional, and compelling story. And you really leave it. You're like, who was right? You don't know. You don't know. Would it have been okay just to leave Willard be? Would it have been okay for, not Willard, but Kurtz? What damage could Kurtz have really done in the jungles of Cambodia, really? And was Willard right to just follow orders? And what was the cost of those orders? So there's just so many moral questions that you have. And
right.
I think everyone should experience it, certainly.
Yeah, that certainly was a incredible thing in that Willard, a U.S. Army officer, has to go assassinate another officer. But that was what happened in the Vietnam Nixon era, stripped everything away when they had the CIA hearings about, running as LBJ said, running a goddamn murder incorporated down in the Caribbean, where we were killing people. And Apocalypse Now was actually based on a real case with Colonel Roll, who was the head of the Green Berets. But, it would take too much time to go into that. But, America had lost its innocence, and American film lost its innocence. You've got you also, we'll have to talk in the future about The Conversation, which was Coppola's other masterpiece of the 70s, which is what's real. What's real? But
who are the heroes?
Right, and there was the psyche of America just got stripped down in those years, and that's where Ronald Reagan didn't get elected necessarily before that because you had the Iran gate, you had high inflation that was screwing everybody, and he got elected, but he also had a persona of a different time, of John Wayne-ish personality, of taking America back to its verities, because living in the psychological state that Vietnam Watergate era, and you see it so well with Sheen's character, he's just destabilizing. The opening scenes of him in the film are just devastating when he's drunk and suicidal, I would say. Hey, Eric, it's great to have you on. We got to we should think about doing a podcast on movies together because we could certainly fill many hours.
That would be fun. I would certainly be interested in that.
Okay. And folks, goodbye, Eric. We'll talk to you soon. Folks, go to...
Yes, thank you for having me.
Hey, great having you on. We'll go to IPM Nation, folks, IPMNation.com, which is Matt Connerton's platform, and you can find Eric's great movie reviews, and he is a great reviewer. Take care, and we'll see you next week.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I appreciate the comment.
The mockingbird had been following the cat all summer, mocking, teasing and cocksure. The cat crawled under the rockers on porches, tail flashing, and said something angry to the mockingbird, which I didn't understand. Yesterday, the cat walked calmly up the driveway, with a mockingbird alive in its mouth. Wings fanned, beautiful wings fanned and flopping, feathers parted like a woman's legs, and the bird was no longer mocking. It was asking, it was praying, but the cat, striding down through the centuries, would not listen. I saw it crawl under a yellow car with the bird, to bargain it to another place. Summer was